Okay, hi everyone. Today is Tuesday, September 7th, 2021. Live streaming from Chicago. I'm Ben Greiner, Director of Apple Technology at Ntiva, and with me today is Ross Matsuda, our Systems Administrator for Apple Technology. Today we will be discussing preparing for the end of the year, not the end of the world, the end of the year, and some random bits and pieces about Apple news. And first, I want to say I've been out a week. I'm back. I have a week and a day, technically, so it's kind of weird to jump right into a live stream because I was digging out of email, which is never fun being away. If anyone has a suggestion on how to deal with email when you're away for a week, let me know. I did read once that maybe this was in Europe, where they just shut your email account off for a week, which I thought was pretty interesting. I'm a little afraid to go that far, but it could be interesting. Okay, so before we get started, some Apple news. Apple One, are you familiar with Apple One, Ross? I'm going to share my screen.
Doesn't ring a bell. Is that one of their streaming and subscription services?
Yeah, it's basically the bundling of all of their services into one package, Apple One. And the reason I mention it is I recently, or for the past year, and I think it was extended because of COVID, I had a free subscription to TV Plus, Apple TV Plus. And of course, their Apple scheme worked. They gave it to me for a year. My family and I watch TV shows, and now we want to continue subscribing. But the free subscription ran out. So I was evaluating what I was paying for, and I had music, and I had TV Plus, and I had iCloud. And what I discovered is for the exact same price of $29.95 per month, I could add news, fitness, and arcade. Now, do I need news, fitness, and arcade? Probably not. In fact, I'm trying to limit the information I consume, so I probably don't need this. Maybe I should work out more, but I'm not into the online fitness stuff, not yet. And I haven't been a gamer since I was a kid, Atari 2600. So, but I thought I would try it out because it's the same amount of money. And then if I decide, I'm not using it, or no one in the family is using it, because this is a family plan. In fact, share with up to 5 other people. I don't even know if they have to exactly be your family. I don't know how that works. But if I don't use it all, I figured I could drop down to the $19.95 a month and drop the news and fitness. What I did discover, and so I'm sharing this information because anyone who has any subscription to Apple should review their plan, see what they're paying, see if it makes sense to consolidate, save some money. But what I also discovered is, because I previously had 2 terabytes of iCloud, and then I got this plan, I now have 4 terabytes of iCloud, which is way more than I need. So for some reason, the iCloud 2 terabytes did not convert, or at least not yet. And I tried downgrading, and it said, I know you can do it, but it was giving me problems. So I haven't done it yet. As soon as I figure that out, I'll share. But yeah, definitely worth looking into if you use any of the Apple services. I want to also mention, I don't like to talk about Apple rumors, but this kind of relates to what we're going to talk about today. And Apple hasn't announced it yet, but we all know Apple's going to have a fall event. And there's a rumor that's going to happen next Tuesday, which would be perfect for us because we don't do live stream next Tuesday. The last several Apple live streams have bumped us. We've had to move our live stream. So if they do it next Tuesday, perfect. The following Tuesday, we'll talk about what we learned in the live stream, but they haven't officially announced it yet. The news is definitely going to be the new operating systems, and we'll talk a little bit about that today, and then probably new iPhones and I don't know what else. But once again, let's not talk too much about it. I just wanted to mention it. Have you heard anything, Ross, about?
Looks like Apple event announced, California streaming September 14th.
Oh, where'd you find that? So they
found that on Mac Rumors. That just posted, looks like about an hour ago. So that is very timely.
Yeah, let's see. Sometimes they, oh, here it
There it
is.
is.
Scroll
Yep.
down. There it
Yep.
is.
So that just dropped.
Nice. So here we are. It is confirmed next
Yep.
Tuesday.
Here we go.
Good. Now we're in sync with Apple. They're going to have this event, and then we'll follow up the week after to talk about it. And then I want to also mention this. This is not Apple news; it's Microsoft news, but it ties into what we're going to talk about, and that is, and Ross, maybe you know this, Microsoft's first major operating system in 6 years, Windows 11, launches October 5th. And I did not realize this. Like, Microsoft hasn't had a major OS release in 6 years, and here Apple is doing it every year. And I must say, there's probably a compromise in between 6 and every year.
Yeah, it was if memory serves, and I do apologize if I'm not remembering this correctly. Microsoft said that with Windows 10, when that all launched, they wanted to do away with the idea of major OS releases and instead just continue to push iterative patches, new features, and smaller things along the way without the headlining that comes with the major, number to change. And they operated on that for a very long time. I'm not sure what prompted the switch. I'm sure there's probably some tech writers who've taken a dive into that.
Mhm.
But yeah, it looks like they're at least going to be launching one more numbered OS, and we'll see what they do going forward.
So to bring that back to why I wanted to mention that is, we know Apple's going to release the next iteration of their operating system, Monterey, which there must be a page on Monterey, right, Ross? Where do I find that? Maybe I'll just search Monterey, Apple. No, not Apple Store Monterey. Am I spelling it right? Big Sur Monterey preview. Here it is. So we know that Apple's going to release this. In fact, Ross, you've been testing the beta version, correct?
Yes, indeed. They're currently on beta 6, and so far so smooth. It's been nice.
So there's kind of rumor that this is a more of a refinement of the current operating system, Big Sur, rather than an entire, Big Sur was a big change, right? They changed the UI, they tightened the security again. Monterey, is there anything that jumps out as like something that we need to be prepared for?
So far, no. It does look like it's going to be a smaller patch, I will say. For example, when I was beta testing Big Sur when I was preparing for launch, a lot of applications were having trouble in it, especially early on in the process. And it took a while for a lot of developers to sort of catch up and write the patches they need. An almost startling number of applications that I've tested in Monterey have worked immediately, even while the OS is still in beta. Which indicates to me that there's probably a higher likelihood that there's not as many really large sweeping changes to the architecture of applications in the OS, as we saw from going to Catalina to Monterey. So I'm hoping this will be an easier OS to adopt. Of course, if you're a company that's going from Catalina straight to Monterey, well, we still need to take a lot of things into consideration from the architecture changes that were a part of Big Sur. But any organizations that are on Big Sur as it currently stands, it looks like the big concern will be touching base with your application developers and making sure that your apps are ready to go. But by and large, I don't at this time believe that it's going to be as big of a hurdle as we're seeing last year for Big Sur.
Which is nice, and that's one of the reasons why I kind of implied that I wish sometimes Apple would slow down and not give us these updates or these big updates, every year. Pros and cons to that. I mean, it's nice to get new features, new abilities. I know one of the big things here, which I think is delayed, is the ability to basically put your iPad next to your Mac and just kind of start using the mouse. What do they call that? Air share or air?
I believe that's universal control. I think that's the term they used for that. Yeah, that got pulled out in beta 4. We're currently on beta 6, waiting for that to get re-added. It sounds like that may be a feature that's actually launched after the OS proper comes out, which is all well and good. There's a lot of other really interesting things in Monterey, especially when it comes to the world of Mac management. It's almost strange because Big Sur was this huge, UX change. The OS looked very, very different. There are a lot of, shiny features for end users. And I believe there's still a good handful of those in Monterey. But without these larger changes, that sometimes made adopting a little bit more painful. There's a lot of great management features in Monterey that we're definitely going to want to take advantage of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we're always kind of stuck in this decision, the middle of the decision, which is, do we wait or do we move forward with a new operating system? And there are often a desire, especially amongst people out there who run their own computers at home, to jump on the operating system as soon as it's released. And I always caution, as much as that sounds like a good idea, you probably want to wait just a little bit. Make sure the people who have spare machines are out there testing it. And really kind of do some due diligence to make sure your software is going to continue to work. Because back in the day, a lot of software with new OS releases would not work. And I think we still run into that, mostly with Adobe Creative Suite, or more likely the extensions that run within Adobe Creative Suite. Some of those extensions that maybe auto-activate fonts or things like that. And in addition to an operating system change, we still are dealing with M1. And I know, Ross, you recently finally got your hands on an M1 test machine. So I don't know if there's any insight that you have to share on that machine. I know it's only been a few days.
It's been a great experience, I'll tell you. So I've been creating a matrix I'm going to be working on internally. That's just a database of what works, what doesn't on the M1 architecture for both Big Sur and Monterey betas. We're going through testing there. But one thing that I just thought was really alarming is I'm working on pretty much the base model MacBook Air. And I had it running side by side with my 16-inch Intel machine. And as my daily driver documenting things. I ran the battery down on my 16-inch from 100% down to 5%. And during that time, I was working on both laptops. And when I had to plug in my Intel computer, my M1 was at 91% battery remaining.
Which
was mind-boggling. The power efficiency in this architecture is absurd.
So you ran them side by side, and when your Intel machine drained out, your M1 was at 90-something%?
Correct. Now, in the interest of fairness, I was obviously doing a lot more on my primary machine. There's no way around that.
Yeah.
But it was really, really jarring.
Yeah.
Performance on them is great. There are some hurdles we're going to have to get over. Probably the most important ones are for software developers that are still using kernel extensions. There's a workflow that you have to go through as an M1 user in order to authorize your computer to do that. Which takes only about a minute or two, but for a user that hasn't gone into the recovery partition before, it can feel a little foreign. And there's only a small number of applications I've run into that don't get virtualized well in Rosetta. Rosetta is Apple's software that sort of translates apps written for Intel machines to the M series processors. And Rosetta 2, as they're calling it, seems to work really, really nicely. I've only run into some things where, an operating system number is interpreted incorrectly and it thinks it's not compatible, or the developers just outright posted like, look, this is not going to work yet. We're dealing with it. We'll let you know when it's ready.
Yeah. Well, speaking of battery life, I know that's reason number 3 on Apple's list of why Macs are great in business. For reason number 3 for Macs, M1 Macs in business. And I because I was away last week, I did stay offline quite a bit, but I took my iPad. And if you take your Mac, at least in my experience, if you take your Mac, even if you don't use it much, unless you physically power it down, but if you just put it to sleep in your bag, if it sits for a week, it's going to drain battery. Just kind of, especially if you have power nap turned on. But the iPad's not like that. And I mention that because the iPad is the precursor to the M1 chip, or at least the chip structure is similar. And it always still does amaze me that I can take an iPad away for a week and come back, and I never plugged it in. I never had to give it any extra juice. Now, to be fair, if I sat down and watched, you know, a movie or something, I'm sure I would have had to juice it up, but I just use it occasionally, and it does have amazing battery life. I also want to mention that this is, I'm backtracking a bit, but I mentioned this, that I traded in, I got an M1 for my son to go back to school. Education pricing, I think $899 versus $999. And we traded in his old MacBook or MacBook Pro, but it was a 2014 model. I think it was a MacBook Pro. It was a hand-me-down from one of us. And so 2014 technology, 7 years old, and Apple gave us $240 in rebate on that MacBook Air M1. So take $899, subtract the 240, and then zero interest APR. It was a great deal. It's just amazing to me that Apple is still worth $240 when it's a 7-year-old computer. And I don't know if they bump that up when you're actually buying. I haven't looked into this. Like if you trade in and buy something, do they give you a better rate than if you just trade it in? Because I know I've traded stuff in before without buying anything. But
That's very possible. I'll also mention here, anyone who's been paying attention to the news, you've probably heard, you know, stories about the computer chip shortages in manufacturing and how that's likely to drive purchase prices up due to this constrained supply. Another option for your older machines, there's please check in with your communities. There are going to be a lot of community outreach programs, schools that could make a lot of great use of working laptops, you know, like 5 years into it. And so if you make that decision that you're going to upgrade your systems, just know that there's a lot of possible ways for you to get a lot of value out of that, either if you go the financial route through, you know, recycling and reselling, or possibly through donation.
yeah, that's a great point. So what I said we would talk about, let's get to that, is year-end planning. And why am I mentioning year-end planning? We just got out of August. We're into September. I know we still have October, November, and December, but we also have fewer days because of the holidays. And historically, in my experience of working in technology, people tend to not do things until, I don't know, they get to the end of the year and they're like, I really want to do this thing this year. And so we see an increase in the number of projects. Apple throws in new operating systems into the mix, and that combines to make the year end rather hectic from a technology standpoint. And if we want to reduce the feeling of being hectic, then we need a change management process, which you've heard me talk about before. Technology, the biggest frustration with technology is when it changes and doesn't work as expected. And even these OS upgrades to Monterey, for example, or even some of the patches Apple's given us recently, it is frustrating to me. Like the recent patch, my watch, which used to unlock my iPhone, or no, my iPhone would unlock my watch, used to be like that. For some reason, the latest update, it now takes forever, feels like forever, or doesn't always work. And so I was just thinking about that as one of those, it's such a minor thing. Like I can type in my code and unlock my watch, but when it's been working for so long really well, and then I get an update, which I'm sure provided some other benefit, but broke that one thing that I didn't even know was a thing, it can be rather frustrating. So we want to minimize frustration rather than introduce frustration. And that's why it is, no matter how much we trust Apple, we want to test this stuff. We want to plan for this stuff. And as Ross mentioned earlier, if you're not yet on Big Sur, you may not want to jump, skip operating systems. It sounds like a good idea. Like, hey, I'll just skip the operating system, go straight to Monterey. That can be difficult. Like sometimes it can work and sometimes it doesn't work. And we've had to stair step. We've had to go, from 10.14 to 10.15 before we can get to 11. Which, by the way, is there a number for Monterey? 11 dot?
Oh, it's macOS 12.
12.
So
okay, so it's 12.
It's going to start going with the iOS paradigm for numbering.
Okay. Great. So the point of all of this is, I know it's early, but if you have any projects that you want to accomplish by the end of the year, please reach out to us. Let's get those scheduled. Let's start talking about them. Let's help you decide, if it's worth doing OS upgrades, or if we want to wait on those OS upgrades. Maybe you get new computers, and maybe those computers, if you buy them today, they're going to ship with Big Sur, but at a certain point, they're going to ship with Monterey. And that's always the other challenge that Apple throws at us, is we don't have a choice in the operating system that you get at a certain point in time. And it's not always clear. You get a computer off the shelf that's been there for a while, which Apple's very good about not having computers sitting on the shelf, but some of the resellers, I know CDW will often have them on the shelf, or you can get them with the old operating system. The point is, you don't want to plan on an operating system that's going to change in the middle of your workflow. So you want to test that. And so there's an article we just posted, and it's a bit ahead of its time because Apple hasn't released this yet. But if I go to support.forgetcomputers.com, and I'm going to browse for it in Ntiva. Here, when should you upgrade to macOS 12 Monterey, iOS 15, iPad OS 15, watchOS 8, and TV OS 15? And Ross, maybe someday they'll just get all these on the same number, so we'll just have 15, 16 for everything. I don't know.
It's nice to dream.
Yeah. So in this article, we kind of walk through, the pros and cons of upgrading, and how we recommend you do that. And the general overview, and I always recommend you reach out to us. Like, don't feel obligated. If you're a client of ours, definitely reach out to us. If you're not a client of ours, I recommend you consider it. And but if it's not a good fit, you can go here, read this, and kind of build your own plan. But the general idea is iPad OS 15 is kind of a safe, easy test of an operating system, because typically, and not always, but typically your iPad is not your primary computer, and it's also not your phone. So it's pretty safe to run this upgrade. And I must say, in all the years I've had an iPad, I don't think I've run into anything too debilitating with an iPad upgrade. Knock on wood, I might have just jinxed myself. But when it comes to iPhone, I remember one year I upgraded, and do you remember this, Ross? People, including myself, lost the ability to make phone calls on my phone.
Oh, geez. That one doesn't ring a bell. I must have missed it.
Well, good. And that was kind of, I always think of that because, I fell into a habit and rhythm of trusting Apple updates. I don't know if this is an update or an upgrade. And just to clarify, updates are small point releases, upgrades are major changes. And these are upgrades we're talking about. But yeah, there's one, I'll just call it an upgrade. Maybe it was an update, but it broke the ability to use my iPhone as a phone, which of course people had a field day in the press talking about this because it's an iPhone and suddenly you can't use it as a phone. But as bad as that sounds, I discovered I didn't actually use my phone features as much as I thought. So I was able to last a couple days without a phone. I was basically an iPod. And then Apple put out a fix. But that is you would not want that to happen to a major device. So if iOS is your one and only device, maybe you don't upgrade right away. Maybe you see what the internet says about it. But let's say you do have a Mac, that's your primary. I'll be testing this out on my iPad first. Then I'll go to my phone. If all goes well, I'll go to my phone, and then I'll go to my watch. And you have to upgrade your phone before you can upgrade your watch. So that's one of the reasons why it's in this order. And then tvOS, actually tvOS could be one of the first updates if you want to, but I don't think I've had any serious issues with tvOS updates. And if I did, I guess I'm not watching TV that night, but yeah, Apple TV update. And then the big one, and the one we're most concerned with because this causes the most disruption, is macOS 12 Monterey. When Apple releases this, and Ross, you're probably too young to remember, but I remember the first time Apple announced free OS upgrades for everybody. It was a startling reveal, and it was very scary for us in the IT business because suddenly we were getting phone calls left and right. My computer doesn't work anymore. I just applied the latest operating system. Can you fix it? And although today it's still, I think, rather hard to downgrade an operating system. It was even harder back then. And that one barrier, which I think it used to be about $99, was the barrier to entry for upgrade, was enough to keep people from doing brash things at the last minute and clicking the upgrade button. But today they don't really have that unless they're in our system, which we do try to prevent people from doing that. So is that still the case?
Yeah, I have not implemented the Monterey blocker yet, as long as it's still in beta. This is a script that is generously given to the community from Adigy, our MDM provider. They create these blockers that we can put out there for current generation operating systems in order to prevent individual rogue users from maybe running an upgrade before the entire organization knows that all their software is going to work. Especially if you have something proprietary or smaller, you really got to make sure that that's going to be okay before you start upgrading your systems. So right now we do have a Big Sur blocker in place for the vast majority of our clients. We also have a Big Sur installer that punches through the blocker, and that's the kind of thing we can deploy to individual organizations once they approve it. But once Monterey launches, yeah, you bet, we're going to be keeping a very close eye on it. We're going to lock that out until we're comfortable that testing is completed. And to be honest, more importantly, that the organization that's requesting it has gone through a test promotion, test upgrade, because we work with people in so many different fields. Everyone's got unique workflows. And you may be using just Microsoft applications in Google, and great, that's all very doable. You may also be operating off of a plugin for InDesign that uses Flash that hasn't been updated since 2009. So we got to pay attention to these things. Generally recommend being a little conservative, but one thing that I would say about this entire paradigm as a whole, like Ben mentioned, when you're buying a new machine after a certain point, what operating system installed there is no longer really under your control. It's just based on what the thing shipped with, and that's what you got to roll with. A lot of our clients, a lot of organizations tend to have at least one spare computer floating around. Could be from an employee who left, could be maybe one of your employees got a new machine. Their old machine's just collecting dust for the moment. Anytime you can get one of those machines that's not a daily driver for one of your employees upgraded just to test everything out, it's going to mean that when you do end up unboxing this new Mac you purchased, if it's got an OS that maybe the rest of your office isn't on yet, you're going to have so many less surprises, so much less downtime if you've had a spare machine running on it and you know what you're going to be in for.
Yeah. I mean, I can't stress this enough because I know it sounds simple. It's like, hey, I've heard people say this, I've done this, I've upgraded my machine every year for the past 10 years. I've never had a problem. And that's great. You're very fortunate. That's fantastic. But especially when you work with a team and you have a workflow that relies on that team, it can be very debilitating if somebody on that team upgrades and starts this chain reaction or domino effect of now Keynote doesn't work. Now, I've got a problem with fonts. Every time I send a document to this person, they can't read the fonts that I embedded into the Illustrator file or whatever the case is. And it's those types of things that can really cause hours and hours of trouble. And sometimes there really is no fix other than to go backward. And Apple, at least on iOS, and maybe, I don't know, on the M1, can you downgrade an operating system, Ross?
I haven't tried it. Generally speaking, when you're downloading an operating system build from Apple, it needs to be signed, right? And so Apple has this process where when you run the installer, it checks in with Apple servers, make sure it's genuine, and see if it's even allowed to operate. And Apple tends to stop signing older OS updates after a certain period.
For security reasons, right?
Yes. For the M system machines, right now that hasn't really been an issue because they all have Big Sur, right? That's just it. There's only the current operating system for them. And so in the future, like for example, in the past, when Apple has launched a new piece of hardware, The operating system that's installed on that hardware when it ships from the manufacturer, that is the oldest OS that can be run on it, period. So if the next batch of laptops that Apple releases have Monterey pre-installed, it can be safely assumed that those will not ever support Big Sur. You won't be able to throw Big Sur on there. And so for the moment, downgrading has not really been a question or an issue. But I don't think we're going to see it be a very viable option for M-series machines going forward.
Yeah. And you can still see my screen, right, Ross?
Yeah.
So just as under support menu, the Ntiva support menu, Mac Manage, you launch that. If you were to search for Big Sur, if you have that option, there's a good chance you could install Big Sur. If you don't, I'm showing it even though I'm already running it. So
I'm actually not seeing that window. I think we're just sharing the Safari window at the moment.
Okay, you're right. Yeah, sorry about that.
But all right.
Let me share my entire screen. Thank you.
Now we're talking.
So go up to the Ntiva support menu, Mac Manage, launches. I typed in Big for Big Sur, and I see install macOS Big Sur, which Ross, this is an aside, but I've already installed it, so it should be grayed out, right?
Absolutely not, because sometimes we need to reinstall the OS.
Okay. So OS is different. Sometimes we have to reinstall. Okay. But if you don't see that, then you might have the Big Sur blocker in place. We can certainly release that upon request to verify that your team is ready and prepared to do so. And we have a process and procedure by which to help you do that using Mac Manage on your team's time, which is super important because this can take a couple hours to complete, and you wouldn't want to kick this off, before doing a presentation, or even if I was given a presentation in the afternoon, I certainly would not kick off an OS upgrade in the morning because things can go sideways at any point. So in summary, year end, we're almost there. Start thinking about it. Start thinking about what you want to accomplish in the year end. Reach out to us, communicate with us so we can help you plan for it, automate for it, get your team up to date, maybe start planning for new computers. We're feeling more and more comfortable with the M1s. Of course, we also anticipate Apple's going to come out with a new Mac at some point this fall. Once again, these are rumors. We don't know exactly when, but we do know they have a 2-year timeline to get all their Macs on some form of M1. They're going to have different names for it. And that leaves basically the Pro machines. I mean, they haven't given us Pro machines with M1, have they? They've basically given us entry level M1 computers,
which is funny because the Mac Mini is just terrifyingly capable for what it is.
Yeah, and that's where it gets a little weird. It's like, okay, now we've got consumer, entry level machines that appear to have more power and battery life and benefits than the Pro machines. But when some of your Pro apps do not run on M1, then the comparison is different. There are reasons why some people might need an Intel, but we're feeling more and more comfortable. I still recommend testing. I had a prospect that actually talked to me the other day and said, should we get an Intel or an M1? I don't know them well enough to know for sure. Plus, even if I did know them really well, I would be very hesitant to say go M1 all the way without any testing or validation or verification, because you just never know. And we've had clients buy M1s and they've had to return them. We've had clients buy M1s and they love them. So keep that in mind. Apple does have a return policy. I think it's 14 days. So keep that in mind. So we've gone a little bit over. I do want to mention one more thing because I normally mention a few other K-base articles. I know we talked about a few of them, but let's see. No, here we are. This one. So I'm going to go back to our main page, and under, where is it? Tips and tricks. Here we go. That worrying message. I just wanted to call this out. That worrying message saying your password has been breached. We've gotten some questions about this. This is an Apple message, and this may be unusual to somebody, but it's basically saying that your password is in a known list of passwords that have been breached. What 1Password has a name for it. I'm drawing a blank right now. Maybe I should just open 1Password and find out.
I think that's Watchtower.
Watchtower, thank you. So 1Password has something called Watchtower, where they look at your passwords and they compare it to known compromised passwords. And Apple's now doing that in Safari. I think they're doing it across all Safari, like iPad, iPhone, and Mac. And if you see this, it's real, it's legit, and you should definitely consider changing your passcode. If you're confused or you want to verify this, reach out to us. We can help you decipher it and decide what to do next. I want to also mention that I think once a week now, I get an email that starts with, hello, have you recently noticed that I have emailed you from your account? Yes, this simply means that I have total access to your device. And then it goes on to explain how they have these secret videos of me, and they're going to release them if I don't pay $1,500 in Bitcoin. And it's always a little nerve-wracking to get those emails. A lot of times they're completely fake, they're phishing, they're lying about having access to your computer, hoping that you'll pay up. But if you are concerned about that, it's always good to do the investigation and figure out if you are breached in any way. So reach out to us. Always use unique passwords. I'm not falling off screen. Always use unique passwords. Always use 2-factor, and use strong passwords. Meaning longer. So just a reminder on that. Ross, have you seen this email I'm talking about, or variation of it?
Yeah. I've gotten so used to it at this point. I think it's been a couple months now.
Yeah.
But it's a neat reminder of the icon that I set for my Outlook account. I was like, oh, that's me again. Great. Off we go.
Yeah. Okay, well, we'll wrap it up. Thanks for joining me, Ross. Apple has their big event next Tuesday. Week after that, we'll talk about it, what Apple announced, and eventually I will have a schedule for everything we're going to talk about for the rest of the year. So I know I've been asked by Holly to do that. Holly, I will get that to you by the next live stream. I said it here live. It's being recorded, so I have to get it done. Okay. Thanks, Ross. Thanks everyone for joining us.
Cheers.
Talk to you later.
Take care.